Martin George is one of those. So today we're talking the emblems, the coat of arms that has everyone up in arms. Good morning, Mr. George. How are you doing?
I love the pun and the way you've posited the discussion.
That's the way to start it. Everyone has a thought about this. So where do you stand on it, first of all?
Well, the thing is, we need to understand, first of all, what's the purpose of a coat of arms. And if it is for the purpose of identification of your nation, then there could be merit in saying that at this point in 2024 and going forward, maybe the three ships of Columbus are not the best identity for Trinidad and Tobago going forward. So, I would say that at the outset. Okay. And I would also say that given the fact that the steel pan has been so closely intertwined with the development of Trinidad and Tobago and our historical perspective, and we are hailed, even Wikipedia, hails Trinidad and Tobago as the birthplace of the steel pan, then I would think that from an identity perspective, the steel pan definitely has much more relevance than the three ships of Columbus.
And understanding that, so where do you stand on the idea of erasing the past and saying that, the ships are part of who we are, and which we're understanding now that even that past is wrong, because the three ships that we got drilled into our heads in primary school, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, aren't those ships that came to Trinidad. So where do you stand on this erasure of history when you think of this argument?
All right. So, it's not just a question of erasing history. It's also a question of who wrote the history. Mm-hmm. Because, you see, we have to recognize that over time, there have been several attempts to write things the way the victors see it. So in other words, I prevailed in victory. I was able to trample upon you. So therefore, I hail myself as the hero, and I paint you as the villain in the piece. So we have to understand that. You look back, for instance, at Spain and look at Spain's history, where the Moors who ruled Spain for several years, their presence, their influence is something that when you look at the history books in Spain, they seem to diminish and minimize their input, their value. But yet still you have Moorish influences in their books, their architecture, their culture. So therefore, we have to understand that if we're talking about, history, we have to recognize that, look, history is written by a perspective of those who choose to put what they say at that time. All right. We have to also recognize that when we talk about Columbus saying he discovered Trinidad and Tobago,
and then we started to say rediscovered as if that's a thing.
Well, exactly, because that totally diminishes and devalues the fact that the native Amerindians were here before. So, if anybody, quote unquote, discovered, then they're the ones who discovered it, because they were here long before him, So therefore, we have to understand that when we are looking at things, it is important to recognize that, look, sometimes there's a need to change, to assess, to reevaluate things going forward.
Absolutely.
Now, I would also put this out there, Kijan, to say that, look, this is not the most important issue facing Trinidad and Tobago at this time. There are many more important, things that, one can, deal with and put on the front burner. So, yes, I support the idea that, look, yes, we can look at changing this. But what I would say is, if we have to change it, let's change it and move on.
Yeah.
We don't need the hullabaloo and the hubris associated with such a discussion.
I like that point. point. And the idea of the Moors in Spain, I did have that same conversation with somebody the other day. I was like, even the Spaniards, as the colonizers, don't celebrate that in that same way. So it's okay to acknowledge history, but not celebrate it with statues and all of that. One question I do have for you as well, though. Is it really that easy to change something as symbolic as the coat of arms?
Coat of arms.
Is it that it's just a simple majority, so any prime minister can come in and add their little 2 cents to the coat of arms, and after a while it will look like the mural on a primary school wall where just everybody have a little piece on it?
Yeah, the thing is, it's not something that, ought to be tinkered and tampered with by, each and every incoming administration, because I have seen people make arguments and say, well, maybe we should put the tassa, we should put the tabla, we should put the sitar, that kind of thing, and of course, it could then become a situation where it becomes basically like a political football, as things tend to be in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not something that ought to be tampered with easily. But as I say, from a historical perspective, if it is that we say that, look, it is time to replace the ships, then I think that, most citizens could agree with that. And I'll also say this, Kijan, for those who think that, you are removing a part of our history, we have to recognize that the steel pan also has a fundamental part of our history, because when you look at the origin of it and how it evolved and how it was actually, formed in the first place, coming also from the Tambu Bamboo, and, the fact that, the colonial governors, suppressed the natives from celebrating and, enjoying themselves in their own way, then there is an historical context to the steel pan. So therefore, we are not necessarily, doing away with our history. We are simply changing the symbol of our history, which we choose to celebrate going forward into, the future.
You make a good point.
We have to look at it from that perspective. But if we're also talking futuristically, what I think is a more important discussion is the idea of the fact that we have lost any opportunity to patent the pan as an invention of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, it has reached the point where it's unpatentable at this stage. So we are not able to say, look, we are the inventors who have a patent for it. And that's where I think we have to start looking at. So therefore, we consider then, for instance, the G-pan, which did get a patent, but that was because it was a derivative and a new invention, a new creation. So what I would like to see our discussion focus on is new, innovative, creative ways. Maybe the government should look at setting up, a university or an institution for the development of the steel pan. Why are we leaving it only in this form? Why can't we look at different ways, different innovations? Because if we're thinking of patents going forward, then this is the time for us to look at it and say, well, okay, we probably create a patent. Maybe you have just like a pan cover that is easily portable, instead of the whole big drum, which may give the same sound. So this is where our discussion should be headed, instead of, always going down into, the guttural, discourse of, well, whether it should be, us against them or anything of the sort.
Yeah, it's devolved into some very nonsensical thing where the pan is PNM and the TASA is UNC. And I was like, But I do love that symbolism that you raised earlier of pan being a moment against our oppressors, Carnival in general against our oppressors, the colonial masters, and to move the ships and put that, I think that is more symbolism. But more than what you said, teach the thing. We're running down in school to teach math and English for SEA, and I feel like the social studies and science aspects are just being put by the wayside. And why there should be a push to teach the thing. Well, when Dr. Rowley was campaigning talking back in 2015, when he was announcing Anthony Garcia as education minister before he'd even won. The first thing Anthony Garcia was supposed to do was to revise the school curriculum to ensure that it taught these things, that it taught about the history of Pan. It taught about that.
It's not just teaching it, Kijan. We have to start being innovative and creative. So there are many areas around the entire steel band movement that need innovation. You look at, for instance, the cumbersome nature of how the bands are arranged, when they push in these big, clumsy, outdated structures onto the stage. It takes half an hour for them to set up. Come on, we are in the year 2024. If we are the birthplace of Pan, why aren't we trying to keep reinventing and improving this thing that we love so much and we care about so much? Then these new innovations are things that we can then apply for patents for and say, well, look, I've come up with a new system whereby we can easily mobilize a team of maybe 120 players, and they could be on stage in 10 minutes because I've come up with these innovations. I've made the pan lighter, I've made it more portable, I've made the sound richer, deeper. Then these are the things we should be looking at and focusing on. We have to understand the potential of what we have. You see places like Japan, you see in Australia, you see in so many other places where they are pushing the steel pan, they are training young persons, they are trying to push the envelope. Why aren't we seeking to do that similarly? So therefore, while the government is talking about replacing the coat of arms, with the pan, I think the government ought to be doing a whole lot more, and ensuring that in real and tangible ways, we are making the steel pan something which not only is symbolic of Trinidad and Tobago, but something which can also reap real and tangible benefits to Trinidad and Tobago going forward.
Now, we letting the coat of arms distract us a little bit, because where this came from was a conversation on constitution reform. And one of the big things that was confusing to me, and it's in one of the papers as well, is, okay, the PNM is saying this is not a PNM initiative, this is national and all of that. But then they have their committee, their referendum, their convention, and they're shooting down certain ideas. And one of the big ones, of course, the fixed dates for elections, even the sexual orientation, several major aspects that I think the public may want to have more conversation on, but you have the PNM rejecting it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, it's a question of occasion and opportunity. And, politicians are nothing but opportunists. And I think Dr. Rowley seized this occasion where he knew he had fertile, and fecund ground upon which to, sow his seed. And he did so because he knew it would be a receptive audience which would lap up anything he says. So therefore, he chose that as the forum for it instead of a national discourse or national discussion or national forum where there may be pushback or there may be other competing ideas. And that's the nature of the beast when you think of a politician. So therefore, they always love persons who will agree with them, who will basically, always massage their egos and always be in supine genuflection before them to say, well, yes, that's a brilliant idea. That's, a wonderful idea. That's a fantastic idea. So that's why I say, while I recognize that, yes, it's, probably a good idea to make the change, I certainly don't want it to be heralded as some sort of political victory or some sort of thing that, you come across as, some new innovation that you've done. There are much more important issues at stake in the nation.
But have you read the Constitution Reform Report, the report that was put
No,
out
I have
committee?
not. In fact, I think that is something that ought to have been made publicly available in the sense sense of having a newspaper pull out, that, the committee should have, invited the public to say, well, hey, look, this is our full report. This is what we are thinking. This is a summary of it. These are the main talking points. These are the issues that are the hot button issues. I think that Mr. Birendra Sinanan and his team ought to have at least shown that respect to the nation by, doing something of that sort. And I'm still hopeful that they will do so that you can engage people. Because if you're talking constitutional reform and if you are serious about it, then obviously you would want the widest possible participation and feedback, but of course, if it is just an election gimmick and it is just basically a pappy show, as we say in the local parlance, then I guess this is par for the course.
Well, we hope that's not it, but let's give the people, I'll give the people at home an idea of, a little behind the scenes of how this went for us. We called Barry Sinanan. Are you giving it to the Prime Minister today? Not today, tomorrow. Okay. Call him again. Did you give it to him? Yes. What's in it? I'll tell you after he reads it. Okay. And then for days, we're asking what's in it? And then somebody just happens to tell us, hey, I think it's on the website. So you're right. There was no formal announcement. There was no place for people to go and read this. It really was not on TV or anything for people to digest it. And then there was the convention. So maybe the rollout was a little insular in that it didn't get all of the opinions. Sure, they didn't get the opinions before, but they certainly didn't get all the opinions after. And then here they are rejecting some elements of it. So I do want you to read it though, because next time they come on, I'll give it your homework.
I certainly will, because it's important. But as I say, one hopes that this is a genuine attempt at making meaningful changes, and it's not going to be just yet another report, of 1,000 and more pages gathering dust somewhere in a corner in years to come, and nobody looks back at it, because we've had several failed attempts at this type of exercise. You've had so many good ideas that are just stashed away in a box somewhere,
Absolutely.
Under somebody's desk, and forgotten on the dust heap of history. So therefore, we would like to think that this is a real and genuine, meaningful attempt at making some progress for us as a nation. But as I say, the rollout process does not necessarily inspire that initial confidence, but we are hopeful that this would be rectified and that there would be a more meaningful engagement with the public to get the feedback from persons who you are basically seeking to do this for. We are the subjects of it. So therefore, we ought to have a say. We ought to be able to, express our views.
Absolutely. And you may even find in some of the comparisons between this one and when Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the People's Partnership had their constitution reform in, I want to say 2015, there might be some similarities. So you never realize that there may be more that binds us than divides us in some of these cases.
Indeed. I think that we can all be agreed that by and large, it's the politicians who seek to divide us constantly, and it's for their own narrow, insular interests.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one thing, at that fixed election dates, it makes planning a lot easier in life if you know when an election is going to be called.
It does. But I think that the interesting thing is when they are in opposition, they're usually all in favor of these ideas. But when they assume power, it's almost like Animal Farm. If you think back to Napoleon and Snowball, and how they changed. When they became from being oppressed to becoming the oppressors themselves. And I think if you look at our politicians, you'd recognize the same thing. And that's why, it's sometimes said that, politicians are just like diapers. They need to be changed often and usually for the same reason.
Martin George, thank you very much. Great spirited discussion. I really do appreciate you taking the time. And like I said, next time you're on the show, I hope you do your homework, Red, because
I will.
I'm definitely sending a reporter to call you back in about a week or so.
I'll do the reading, yes, I will.
All the best. All right,
Thank
Trinidad and Tobago. Let's check the time. 7:25. Wow, the day is going by today.